Okay, so today we're going to read the next couple chapters of Ezekiel, and we're going to be finishing off this section that covers the nations around Israel. I didn't get to this yesterday. I would have liked to. Yesterday I did chapters 25 through 28. Today we're going to be doing 29 through 32. This is all about Egypt. Now, yesterday we read a little bit about Moab, Ammon, Edom, Philistia, and then a lot about Tyre. Today we're going to read a lot about Egypt. I would have liked to have done this yesterday, just include all in the same day, get all done with in one day. But I had somewhere to go yesterday, so I was kind of pressed for time. So I'm going to go ahead and do this today. And then after we get done with this section, we're going to go back to the Israelites. We're going to be focusing on them again, and we're going to be reading the account of the fall as Ezekiel received the news. We already read about the account of the fall itself, from an eyewitness account in Jerusalem when Jeremiah recorded it in his book, and then also in Kings and Chronicles. So we're not going to read the account of the fall itself per se, because Ezekiel's not in Jerusalem when it happens, but he gets the account of it afterwards. And then we're going to start looking forward to the restoration that is to come someday after that. That'll be in chapters 33 and through the end of the book. We're not getting to that today. Today we're going to be talking about Egypt. This is chapters 29 through 32. This is a part of the book that is not arranged chronologically. For whatever the reason, Ezekiel sees fit to put the ending first, pretty much. He's going to give us a lot of dates again. These visions are dated. These words he gets from God are dated. And for whatever the reason, he puts like the last one close to the first, just so we know how it turns out. I guess he does that so we know how it turns out right away, I guess. I don't know. At any rate, so this isn't part of the same chronological narrative as the stuff about Israel and Judah. We are still dating it from the beginning of their exile, though, so. Chapter 29. In the 10th year, in the 10th month, on the 12th day. So this is a new word, a new vision. Does not have to do with the previous sections. A new word coming to Ezekiel from God. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, or human, set your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak to him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, you great monster lying among your streams. You say, the Nile is mine. I made it for myself. But God speaking now, will put hooks in your jaws and make the fish of the streams stick to your scales. I will pull you out from among your streams with all the fish sticking to your scales. I think the imagery here is supposed to be evocative of when they would pull crocodiles out of the Nile River. I've never pulled a crocodile out of the Nile River, so I haven't seen this myself, but that seems to be the imagery that we're describing this as. I will leave you in the desert, you and all the fish of your streams. You will fall upon the open field and not be gathered or picked up. I will give you as food to the beasts of the air, earth, and the birds of the air. That all who live in Egypt will know that I am the Lord. You have been a staff of reed for the house of Israel. So why is this happening? Why is he being judged? Well, you have been a staff of reed for the house of Israel. When they grasped you with their hands, like you're trying to stand on top of a staff or a cane, you splintered and you tore open their shoulders. When they leaned on you, you broke, and their backs were wrenched. So they were trying to lean on Pharaoh, and he folded right underneath them, and they fell down. The Pharaoh being spoken... Okay, so this is the 10th year of their exile, which started in 590. This is actually near the end of the 10th year. 10th year, 10th month, 12th day. So pretty close to the end of their 10th year in exile. Their exile will start in 597 BC, so this is now sometime in 587 or 586 BC. This is during the invasion of by Nebuchadnezzar of Judah. What this is probably referring to, okay, so we read in the history books and in Jeremiah that, Judah had sent to Egypt for help. They had made an alliance with Egypt. We've read several times about how Zedekiah, the king of Judah, last king of Judah, had made a covenant to be loyal to Babylon. When Babylon came and put him on the throne and took Jehoiachin, the previous king, only 3 months away, Zedekiah was put on the throne as sort of a puppet king for Nebuchadnezzar, and he had made a covenant, an oath, taken in the name of the Lord, to be Babylon's vassal. But at some point, he rebelled against that and decided he did not want to be Babylon's vassal, so he was going to join an alliance with other nations around him, primarily with Egypt, to try to fight Babylon. And the Pharaoh in charge this time is a guy named, in the Bible his name is Hophra, in Greek his name is Apries or whatever, in Egypt his name is something else, but we're going to call him Hophra because that's the name you would see in the biblical text here. It's a Hebrew version of his name. And he was in charge during this time, and he was the guy that was he was fighting against Babylon. He did not want Babylon to continue its westward expansion into the Levant and the Mediterranean area, so he made an alliance with Judah. But there came a point when he came up to assist Judah in their siege, in their besiegement by Babylon, but he left. He withdrew, he retreated. Apparently he didn't bring a big enough army, or he didn't feel like he had any chance to actually beat the Babylonians. So he went up there, and the Babylonians did leave to go meet him. You read about that in Jeremiah. There was a break in the siege at a certain point in time, as the Babylonians did leave to go engage the army of Egypt. The army of Egypt retreated, and there was no fighting, and so the Babylonians then resumed their siege of Jerusalem and destroyed the city. A very similar circumstance to what happened 100 plus years earlier when Assyria was besieging Jerusalem, and the Pharaoh at that time came up to assist and then retreated again without a fight, and we read about that in Isaiah. We didn't really read a very clear account of that, but very similar. Like I said before, I think the Judeans, the king in particular, and his wise men and counselors, we're probably counting on that happening again. We're counting on God delivering them from Babylon in the same way, or basically the same way as he had delivered them from Assyria 130 years earlier, but he didn't do it this time. In both instances, both 130 years earlier and now, against Assyria and against Babylon, Egypt ended up not being any help at all. So Pharaoh has abandoned Judah and left them, and so that's what the imagery of him being a staff or a cane that breaks and causes a person trying to rely on it to fall. Like if you actually have a cane, now I'm not old enough to need a cane yet. I'm not injured enough or disabled enough in my legs or hips to need a cane. My mom is. My mom has a cane. And if you're using a cane, you're putting a lot of your weight on that cane. I mean, it's not just there for decoration if you really need it to walk. So they're putting their weight down on this staff, and it breaks. It folds right underneath them, and they get injured when they fall. And that is why, that in his haughtiness, he thinks more of himself than he should, and he did not end up providing any assistance to the Judeans, and that is why he's being judged, this Pharaoh Hophra. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I'll bring a sword against you and kill your men and your animals. Egypt will become a desolate wasteland. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Because you said the Nile is mine, I made it. Therefore, that sounds a lot like trying to claim credit for God's activities, which is what the guy in Tyre had done in the previous couple of chapters. We tend to do that, whether it's the king of Egypt or the king of Tyre, or the king of Gog, as we're going to read about here in a few chapters, or whoever. I mean, we tend to do that. Human beings tend to want to do that. Therefore, I am against you and against your streams, and I will make the land of Egypt a ruin and a desolate waste, from Migdol to Aswan, and as far as the border of Cush, it's Ethiopia, the southern border. No foot of man or animal will pass through it. No one will live there for 40 years. I will make the land of Egypt desolate among devastated lands, and her cities will lie desolate 40 years among ruined cities. And I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations and scatter them through the countries. I don't know if that 40 years is literally 40 years or not, or if it just stands in for a long, complete period of time. I'm not really sure. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. At the end of 40 years, I will gather the Egyptians from the nations where they were scattered. I'll bring them back from captivity and return them to Upper Egypt, that's southern Egypt actually, the land of their ancestry. There they will be a lowly kingdom. So they'll be allowed to exist, but only as a lowly kingdom. It will be the lowliest of kingdoms, and it will never again exalt itself above the other nations. I'll make it so weak that it will never again rule over the nations. Egypt will no longer be a source of confidence for the people of Israel, but will be a reminder of their sin and turning to her for help. So he's going to restore the Egyptians, not really even for their own sake, for the sake of them perpetuating their culture and their nation, but so that they exist as a weakened nation, as in a weakened state for Israel to look at and say, hey, we shouldn't rely on them. Then they will know that I am the Lord, the sovereign Lord. Okay, so the flow of history here. Okay, so this is the 10th year of their exile, which is about the year 587, 586 BC, which is right before Jerusalem itself falls. Jerusalem hasn't fallen yet, but it's going to very soon, months away. Only months away at this point. Once Nebuchadnezzar finishes up with Judah, he is going to turn his attention to Tyre, which we read about in the previous chapter. He is going to fight Tyre for a number of years. Egypt is actually going to help Tyre, because Egypt has access to the Mediterranean Sea from its northern shore, and it's going to send supplies and equipment and men up to Tyre, which is an island city. It's an island city that Nebuchadnezzar doesn't have access to because he doesn't have control of it. And Egypt is going to be sending ships on the Mediterranean to Tyre to help them out. And Nebuchadnezzar is going to fight Tyre for 13 years. And although apparently he had a lot of success with the mainland cities, the cities on the coast, the actual mainland cities of Phoenicia, he did not conquer Tyre itself. So he eventually gives that up. I don't know exactly when or how, in the late 570s BC. And then he turns attention to Egypt. And goes down to Egypt and fights Egypt and conquers Egypt. And remember also that after the fall of Jerusalem, we read about this in Jeremiah, the refugees from Judah go into Egypt, even though God does not want them to. So they're going to be chased there by Babylon. Now it'll take about 10 years. Babylon's not going to get down there until about 570 BC or so, maybe even a little bit later. But they're going to eventually get there. Nebuchadnezzar is eventually going to turn his attention to Babylon, to Egypt, I should say, to fighting Egypt itself. He's been fighting Egypt through like these proxy wars with Egypt's allies, and he eventually gets to Egypt itself in the 560s BC. And he sacks Egypt, and he conquers it. And then, years later, the Persians take over Babylon and take over all Babylonian territory, and they have control of Egypt. So Egypt itself, and then the Persians will rule for a couple hundred years, and the Greeks will come along and rule. And Egypt will still exist as a nation, but it will never be a dominant nation again. I'm not even sure if it's an independent nation again after this. So they will still exist, and they'll still have their typical distinctive Egyptian culture and all that. They'll still have a pharaoh. They'll still have a guy they call Pharaoh. But they're never going to be like they were before. In the 27th year, so to show this, to demonstrate this, we're going to skip right down to the 27th year. So 17 years later. The first month of the first day. So this would be about the year 570 or so BC. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, drove his army in a hard campaign against Tyre. Every head was rubbed bare and every shoulder made raw. Yet he and his army got no reward from the campaign he led against Tyre. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I'm going to give Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he will carry off its wealth. He will loot and plunder the land as pay for his army. I have given him Egypt as a reward for his efforts, because he and his army did it for me, declares the sovereign Lord. They didn't know they were doing it for him. Well, they may have had some, I shouldn't necessarily say that, they may have had some awareness of it. They knew about Jeremiah. Nebuchadnezzar knows Daniel very well. Daniel is a Hebrew prophet right there in Nebuchadnezzar's own court. So they might have had some awareness. They weren't doing it for him per se. That wasn't their motivation for doing it. But they would have had, because Nebuchadnezzar was surrounded by Hebrew prophets, he would have had some awareness of this. Although it took a long time. We'll read about this in the book of Daniel. It took a long time for it to really sink in. On that day I will make a horn grow for the house of Israel. A horn, of course, being a sign of strength. And I will open your mouth among them. Then they will know that I am the Lord. That's actually the last dated prophecy we have in the book of Ezekiel. So we know his career went down to his 27th year in the first month of the first day. And that's actually the last dated date he gives us in the book. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man. Now we have a new chapter here in our English copies that there isn't. I'm assuming this is supposed to go along with the section we just got done reading about the 27th year here. So that was about the year 570 BC. So Nebuchadnezzar has called off his assault on Tyre, which he'd been doing for a long time at this point, and he's going to turn his attention to Babylon, or to Egypt soon. I'm assuming this is part of the same material. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Wail and say, alas for that day, for the day is near, the day of the Lord is near. That's the day that God comes in judgment, the day of clouds. A time of doom for the nations. A sword will come against Egypt, and anguish will come upon Cush. When the slain fall in Egypt, her wealth will be carried away and her foundations torn down. Cush and Put, Lydia and all Arabia, Libya and all the people of the covenant land, and that'd be probably the Jews who fled to Egypt and are still living there to hide from Nebuchadnezzar, will fall by the sword along with Egypt. This is what the Lord says. The allies of Egypt will fall, and her proud strength will fail. From Migdol to Aswan they will fall by the sword within her, declares the sovereign Lord. They'll be desolate among desolate lands, and their cities will lie among ruined cities. Then they will know that I am the Lord, when I set fire to Egypt, and all her helpers are crushed. On that day, messengers will go out from me in ships to frighten Cush out of her complacency. Anguish will take hold of them on the day of Egypt's doom, for it is sure to come. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will put an end to the hordes of Egypt by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He and his army, the most ruthless of nations, will be brought in to destroy the land. They will draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. I'll dry up the streams of the Nile and sell the land to evil men. By the hand of foreigners I will lay waste the land and everything in it. I, the Lord, have spoken. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will destroy the idols and put an end to the images in Memphis. No longer will there be a prince in Egypt, and I will spread fear throughout the land. I will lay waste to Upper Egypt, that's the south, set fire to Zone, that's one of their old capital cities, and inflict punishment on Thebes. I will pour out my wrath on Pelusium, the stronghold of Egypt, and cut off the whores of Thebes. These are, of course, all major Egyptian cities. I will set fire to Egypt. Pelusium will writhe in agony. Thebes will be taken by storm. Memphis will be in constant distress. The young men of Heliopolis and Bubastis will fall by the sword, and the cities themselves will go into captivity. Dark will be the day at Taphanes, when I break the yoke of Egypt. That's where some of the Hebrew refugees went earlier. There her proud strength will come to an end. She will be covered with clouds, and her villages will go into captivity. So I will inflict punishment on Egypt, and they will know that I am the Lord. So that was all I've been given on the 27th year, first month of the first day of the first month. Now we'll go back. Okay, so that was like a look ahead at how it all turns out eventually. Basically, the timeline here is that, like I said, Nebuchadnezzar went after Tyre after defeating. He fought Judah, defeated Jerusalem. That was on 586 BC. Then he went to Tyre and fought Tyre for a number of years. Finally gave that up around 570 BC, which is what God's referring to here. This is about 570 BC. Then turned his attention to Egypt and conquered Egypt in the early 560s BC. Which we read about in Jeremiah he was going to do because God was not going to let the Judean refugees go down there to get away from him. Now they got to be there for about 15 years before Nebuchadnezzar showed up. But he did eventually chase them down into Egypt and took care of them as well as Egypt itself. I'm going to go ahead and start a new video.